My wife cheated and thought she could hide it behind encrypted apps and lies, so I used my cybersecurity skills to expose her, ruin him, and walk away smiling. They say that in the digital age, nothing ever truly disappears. Every text, every photo, every secret conversation leaves a trail that someone with the right skills can follow. As a cybersecurity consultant, I'd built my career on this principle, helping corporations protect themselves from digital threats and data breaches. I never imagined I'd use those same skills to uncover my wife's affair with her high school boyfriend, or that the evidence I'd gather would become the foundation for the most methodical, devastating counterattack of my life. Sometimes the best revenge isn't served hot. It's served with forensic precision, digital timestamps, and irrefutable proof that destroys lives one carefully planned revelation at a time. Looking back now, I can see that Jessica and I were the perfect 21st century couple, at least on the surface. We'd met in graduate school 6 years ago, both pursuing technology-focused careers that seemed to complement each other perfectly. I was building expertise in cybersecurity and digital forensics, while Jessica was mastering the art of digital marketing and social media strategy. We understood each other's work, spoke the same technological language, and built a relationship around shared devices, transparent communication, and the kind of digital integration that made us feel completely connected. At 34, I'd established myself as a respected cybersecurity consultant, working with mid-sized companies to protect their networks from increasingly sophisticated threats. My expertise in digital forensics had made me particularly valuable to clients dealing with data breaches or internal security investigations. I could track digital footprints through complex systems, recover deleted files from damaged drives, and piece together comprehensive timelines of digital activity that told stories more complete than any witness testimony. Jessica, 32, had built an impressive career in marketing management, specializing in digital campaigns that leveraged social media analytics and consumer behavior data. She understood how people interacted with technology on an emotional level, while I understood how technology worked on a technical level. Together, we felt like we had all the tools necessary to navigate the modern world successfully. Our marriage had been built on transparency that felt revolutionary compared to previous generations. We shared passwords freely, used each other's devices interchangeably, and maintained joint social media accounts that reflected our partnership rather than individual identities. Our friends often commented on how refreshing our openness was, how secure we seemed in our relationship, how comfortable we were with the kind of digital intimacy that many couples struggled to achieve. The lifestyle we'd built reflected our professional success and mutual understanding of digital culture. We lived in a modern townhouse with a home office setup that allowed us both to work remotely when needed. Our entertainment was heavily tech-integrated: streaming services, gaming systems, smart home devices that responded to voice commands, and automated our daily routines. We documented our life together across multiple platforms, sharing vacation photos, anniversary celebrations, and professional achievements with a network of friends and colleagues who followed our relationship like a successful startup they'd invested in emotionally. Our daily routines were synchronized around technology in ways that felt natural rather than forced. We'd wake up to shared alarms, check news and social media together over coffee, coordinate our schedules through shared calendars, and end each day by watching streaming content curated by algorithms that had learned our combined preferences. Even our arguments were mediated by technology. We text each other clarifications during busy workdays, send articles that supported our positions on various topics, and make up by sharing memes that made us laugh. The professional respect we had for each other's expertise created a foundation of intellectual intimacy that I'd never experienced in previous relationships. Jessica would ask my opinion on cybersecurity policies for her company's digital campaigns, while I'd seek her advice on user experience design for the security training programs I developed for clients. We felt like partners in every sense: romantic, professional, and technological. For 6 years, this approach had worked beautifully. We'd weathered the usual challenges that couples face: job stress, family drama, financial decisions. But we'd always maintained the kind of communication that made problems feel manageable rather than threatening. Our relationship felt sustainable in ways that many of our friends' relationships didn't, built on mutual respect, shared interests, and compatible approaches to modern life. Which is why the subtle changes in Jessica's behavior took me so long to recognize and even longer to take seriously. The shifts were small, the kind of adjustments that could easily be attributed to work stress or natural evolution in a long-term relationship. But my professional training in pattern recognition and anomaly detection eventually kicked in, even though I initially resisted applying those skills to my personal life. The first change I noticed was Jessica's relationship with her phone. She'd always been active on social media, but her engagement patterns shifted in ways that seemed inconsistent with her usual habits. She'd check messages more frequently, but respond less quickly. She'd receive notifications that made her smile in ways that seemed disconnected from whatever we were doing together. Most notably, she started taking her phone with her to places she'd never bothered before. The bathroom, the kitchen while cooking, even short trips outside to check the mail. Her device security practices changed too, though so gradually that I didn't recognize the pattern immediately. Jessica began using password protection on devices that had never been secured, claiming that her company's new cybersecurity policies required better personal data protection. She started closing laptop screens when I entered the room, explaining that client confidentiality required more careful information handling. These explanations made perfect sense professionally, but they represented a fundamental shift from the transparency that had characterized our relationship. The social media changes were more subtle but equally significant. Jessica's posting patterns became more calculated, less spontaneous. She'd spend longer crafting captions, delete and rewrite posts multiple times, and seem unusually concerned about who was seeing and responding to her content. Her engagement with other people's posts changed too. She became more selective about what she liked or commented on, as if she was curating her digital presence for a specific audience rather than sharing authentically with our mutual network. Her work schedule became more unpredictable in ways that didn't align with the project timeline she'd shared with me. She'd have last-minute meetings that required staying late, weekend calls that couldn't be postponed, and client emergencies that seemed to occur with unusual frequency. When I'd offer to help or ask about the details of these work challenges, Jessica would deflect or provide vague explanations that felt rehearsed rather than genuine. Most concerning was the change in her emotional availability during our usual connection points. Our morning coffee conversations became distracted, with Jessica checking her phone frequently and seeming to focus on something beyond our shared space. Our evening debriefing sessions, where we'd traditionally shared the details of our days and planned for upcoming events, became perfunctory exchanges that lacked the depth and engagement that had always characterized our communication. The technical anomalies were what finally triggered my professional instincts, though I initially tried to ignore what my training was telling me. Jessica's data usage patterns had changed significantly, suggesting new applications or increased activity on existing platforms. Her browser history, when I could access it, showed gaps that indicated regular deletion of activity records. Her email patterns showed more encrypted communications and less visible correspondence with people I recognized. When I mentioned these observations, Jessica had reasonable explanations for every concern. The increased data usage was due to new marketing analytics tools her company was testing. The browser privacy measures were part of the enhanced cybersecurity protocols I'd taught her to implement. The work schedule changes reflected her advancement into more senior responsibilities that required greater flexibility and client availability. Every explanation made sense in isolation, but together they formed a pattern that my professional experience recognized as systematic deception. Someone was deliberately obscuring their digital activities, creating false narratives to explain behavioral changes, and implementing security measures designed to prevent investigation rather than protect legitimate privacy. The realization that I might need to investigate my own wife felt like a betrayal of everything our relationship had been built on. But the evidence was mounting in ways that my professional training wouldn't let me ignore, and the alternative, pretending that nothing was wrong, felt like willful blindness that would only make the eventual revelation more devastating. The discovery came through the kind of routine technical support that had always characterized our relationship. Jessica's laptop had been experiencing performance issues that were affecting her work productivity, and she'd asked me to diagnose and fix whatever was causing the problems. This was normal for us. I handled all our technology troubleshooting, while she managed our digital marketing and social media presence. I'd expected to find the usual culprits: malware, outdated software, storage issues that could be resolved with basic maintenance. Instead, I found evidence of sophisticated efforts to hide digital communications, including cached data from messaging applications that Jessica had never mentioned using, and browser extensions designed to encrypt and obscure online activity. The moment that changed everything was opening a draft message folder that had auto-saved conversations from a messaging platform I'd never seen on Jessica's devices before. The name at the top of the conversation thread was Brandon, and the context made it immediately clear that this wasn't a professional colleague or casual friend. Brandon. I remembered the name from Jessica's stories about high school, though she'd never mentioned maintaining contact with him after graduation. According to the message timestamps, they'd been in regular communication for at least 4 months, with conversations that had evolved from casual reminiscence about shared memories to increasingly intimate discussions about their current lives and relationships. The professional side of my mind kicked in immediately. Recognizing this as the kind of digital evidence that would be crucial in any investigation, I began systematically documenting what I was finding. taking screenshots with timestamp verification, and building a comprehensive record of the digital trail that Jessica had tried so carefully to hide. The personal side of my mind was struggling to process the implications of what I was discovering. This wasn't just casual conversation with an old friend. The tone and content of these messages revealed an emotional and physical affair that had been developing for months without my knowledge. Every late-night work session, every weekend emergency call, every unexplained schedule change suddenly had a different explanation. Reading through months of secret conversations was like watching the dissolution of my marriage in real time. I could see how the initial contact had been initiated, how the conversations had gradually become more personal, how Jessica had begun sharing complaints about our relationship and fantasies about alternative life paths. I could see Brandon's skilled manipulation, the way he'd positioned himself as the understanding friend who could provide emotional support that I apparently wasn't offering. The most devastating discovery was the timeline correlation between Jessica's behavioral changes toward me and her increasing intimacy with Brandon. The periods when she'd been most distant and distracted corresponded exactly with the times when their conversations had been most frequent and emotionally intense. I was watching the real-time documentation of how my wife had transferred her emotional energy from our marriage to a secret relationship that I'd been completely unaware of. The technical evidence revealed a level of sophistication in hiding the affair that spoke to deliberate, sustained deception rather than momentary poor judgment. Jessica had installed encrypted messaging applications, used browser privacy modes consistently, and implemented data deletion protocols that would have hidden the evidence from anyone without professional digital forensics training. This wasn't a casual reconnection that had gotten out of hand. This was a carefully planned and executed betrayal that had been designed to remain hidden indefinitely. The conversations revealed plans for in-person meetings that correlated with Jessica's unexplained absences from our usual routines. Hotel reservations made with alternative payment methods, restaurant dinners that she'd claimed were business meetings, and weekend trips that I'd been told were work conferences. The digital evidence provided a complete parallel timeline of a relationship that had been developing alongside our marriage without my knowledge. As I compiled the evidence, my professional training helped me maintain the emotional distance necessary to build a comprehensive case. I approached the investigation with the same methodical thoroughness that I brought to corporate security breaches, understanding that emotional reactions would compromise the quality of the evidence and potentially alert the subjects to the investigation. The scope of the deception became clearer as I expanded my analysis beyond the initial messaging platform. Jessica had been using multiple communication channels, compartmentalizing different aspects of her relationship with Brandon across various applications and platforms. The coordination required to maintain this level of secrecy while living in close proximity to someone with my technical expertise was actually impressive from a purely professional standpoint. But the personal impact was devastating in ways that my professional experience hadn't prepared me for. I'd investigated corporate espionage, intellectual property theft, and complex financial fraud, but I'd never had to apply those skills to someone I loved, someone I'd trusted completely. Someone whose betrayal felt like a fundamental violation of everything I'd believed about human nature and relationship authenticity. The evidence-gathering phase took 3 weeks of careful, systematic work. I had to balance thoroughness with discretion, building a complete picture of the affair without alerting Jessica to my investigation. The technical challenges were minimal. My professional tools and expertise made data recovery and timeline reconstruction relatively straightforward. The emotional challenges were overwhelming in ways that threatened to compromise my ability to think strategically about how to respond. During this period, I maintained complete normalcy in our daily interactions, using the same performance skills that my work sometimes required when conducting undercover investigations. I continued our usual routines, responded to Jessica's affection and conversation as if nothing had changed, and even provided technical support for the same devices that I was using to document her betrayal. The internal conflict was extraordinary. Part of me wanted to confront Jessica immediately, to demand explanations and force a resolution to the uncertainty that was consuming my emotional energy. But my professional experience warned me that premature confrontation would likely result in gaslighting, partial confessions, and coordinated story development that would make the truth harder to establish definitively. I decided to expand the investigation to include Brandon's background and digital presence, understanding that comprehensive knowledge of both parties would be essential for developing an effective response strategy. Using the same open-source intelligence techniques that I employed for corporate investigations, I began building a detailed profile of the man who was systematically destroying my marriage. Brandon's digital footprint revealed patterns that were disturbing but unsurprising. His social media presence showed a history of inappropriate interactions with married women. including several previous situations that appeared to follow similar patterns to his relationship with Jessica. He seemed to specialize in reconnecting with women from his past during vulnerable periods in their current relationships, offering emotional support that gradually evolved into romantic and physical involvement. His professional situation was unstable in ways that suggested character issues beyond just relationship problems. He'd changed jobs frequently, often leaving positions under circumstances that weren't entirely clear from public records. His financial situation appeared precarious, with lifestyle choices that seemed inconsistent with legitimate income sources. The pattern suggested someone who might be motivated by financial gain as well as emotional manipulation. Most concerning was evidence that Jessica wasn't his only current target. His communication patterns and social media activity suggested simultaneous inappropriate relationships with multiple women, indicating systematic predatory behavior rather than genuine romantic connection. Jessica was being manipulated by someone who viewed her as one of several ongoing projects, rather than a meaningful romantic interest. This discovery transformed my emotional response from devastation to calculated anger. Jessica's betrayal was devastating enough, but learning that she was being victimized by someone who specialized in destroying marriages added a layer of protective fury that clarified my thinking about appropriate responses. I began developing a comprehensive plan that would address both the immediate crisis in my marriage and the broader problem of Brandon's predatory pattern. The technical capabilities that made me effective at corporate investigations could be applied to personal situations with equal precision, and I had access to resources and expertise that could make the consequences for both parties far more severe than they probably anticipated. The strategy I developed was based on principles of systematic exposure rather than emotional confrontation. Both Jessica and Brandon had gambled that their deception would remain hidden, that their technical precautions would be sufficient to protect them from discovery, and that even if the affair were eventually revealed, the consequences would be manageable through damage control and selective truth-telling. I planned to prove them wrong on every count. The first phase involved expanding my evidence collection to include financial records, location data, and communication metadata that would make denial impossible. I used professional-grade forensic tools to recover deleted files, analyzed network traffic patterns to identify all communication channels, and cross-referenced activity logs across multiple platforms to build a timeline that was accurate to the minute. The second phase involved researching the legal and professional implications of their actions, understanding what consequences might be possible through official channels, and identifying ways to maximize accountability for both parties. This research revealed that Brandon's workplace had strict policies regarding personal conduct that could affect professional reputation, while Jessica's company had similar guidelines about ethical behavior and conflict of interest management. The third phase involved building a comprehensive exposure plan that would ensure the truth reached everyone who needed to know it, in a sequence and format that would maximize impact while minimizing my own exposure to retaliation or legal complications. This required careful consideration of privacy laws, harassment regulations, and professional ethics guidelines that could protect me, while ensuring that appropriate consequences followed naturally from the revelation of documented facts. The most satisfying aspect of developing this plan was realizing that I could achieve complete justice without breaking any laws, violating any ethical guidelines, or compromising my own professional reputation. Everything I was planning involved sharing factual information with people who had legitimate reasons to know it, using evidence that had been gathered through legal means, and allowing natural consequences to follow from documented behavior. Jessica and Brandon had created an elaborate deception designed to hide their affair from me specifically, but they'd overlooked the reality that their behavior had implications for many other people who deserved to know the truth. Brandon's wife, Jessica's family, our mutual friends, their respective employers, and the broader community of people who might become future victims all had legitimate interests in understanding the kind of people they were dealing with. The execution phase began with the most important revelation: Brandon's wife discovering her husband's serial infidelity through carefully curated evidence that documented not just his affair with Jessica, but his simultaneous inappropriate relationships with several other women. The evidence was delivered anonymously but professionally, with sufficient documentation to make verification straightforward and denial impossible. Brandon's workplace received similar information, presented as a concern about employee conduct that might affect client relationships and company reputation. The evidence focused on documented patterns of deceptive behavior, misuse of company resources for personal activities, and character issues that could represent liability risks for an organization that depended on client trust. Jessica's company received information about potential conflicts of interest and ethical violations, presented as concerns about employee conduct that might affect the organization's reputation and relationships with business partners. The focus was on documented deception, misuse of professional resources, and character issues that could represent compliance risks for a company operating in regulated industries. The broader social exposure was handled through strategic sharing of information with mutual friends, family members, and professional networks. The information was presented factually with supporting documentation and with clear explanations of why each recipient needed to understand the situation for their own protection or decision-making purposes. Throughout this process, I maintained complete denial of involvement, positioning myself as someone who was discovering the truth at the same time as everyone else. My professional expertise in digital forensics allowed me to share information in ways that made the source unidentifiable, while my understanding of evidence presentation ensured that the documentation was compelling and verifiable. The timing of these revelations was coordinated to create maximum impact while preventing effective damage control responses. By the time Jessica and Brandon realized that their affair had been exposed, the information had already reached everyone who needed to know it, with sufficient documentation to make denial strategies impossible and reputation management efforts ineffective. Jessica's first indication that something was wrong came when her supervisor called her into a meeting to discuss concerning information that had been brought to the company's attention regarding her professional conduct and character. The evidence package included detailed timelines of her deceptive behavior, documentation of her use of company resources for personal activities, and character references that raised questions about her trustworthiness and judgment. Brandon's discovery was more dramatic. His wife confronted him with comprehensive evidence of his multiple affairs, while simultaneously filing for divorce and providing the same evidence to his employer, his professional network, and his social circle. The coordination of these revelations meant that his attempts to control the narrative or manage the damage were overwhelmed by the volume and speed of information distribution. The community response was swift and comprehensive. Friends and family members who had trusted and supported both Jessica and Brandon felt betrayed by the deception and manipulation, leading to immediate social consequences that extended far beyond our immediate situation. Professional colleagues who had worked with them began questioning their judgment and character, leading to business consequences that would affect their careers for years to come. The most satisfying aspect of the entire operation was watching Brandon's carefully constructed life collapse under the weight of documented truth. His marriage ended within weeks. His employment was terminated after an internal investigation confirmed policy violations, and his social circle rejected him as soon as they understood the systematic nature of his predatory behavior. The other women he'd been manipulating simultaneously also learned about each other, creating a network of victims who supported each other while ensuring that his pattern couldn't continue. Jessica's consequences were equally comprehensive, but more personally painful to witness. The family that had welcomed me as a son-in-law turned against her when they understood the scope of her deception and the impact on my life. Friends who had celebrated our relationship felt betrayed by her manipulation of their trust and support. Professional colleagues who had respected her expertise began questioning her character and judgment, leading to career damage that would follow her for years. The legal aspects of our divorce were simplified by the comprehensive evidence I'd gathered. Jessica's attempts to negotiate favorable terms were undermined by documentation of her deception, financial misconduct, and character issues that made her position untenable. The settlement I achieved protected my assets while ensuring that she faced appropriate consequences for her actions. But the most meaningful outcome was the restoration of my faith in justice and accountability. For months, I'd felt helpless and victimized by Jessica's deception, unable to respond effectively because I lacked complete information about what was happening to my marriage. The investigation and exposure process had returned control of the situation to me, allowing me to respond strategically rather than emotionally to betrayal. The professional growth that emerged from this experience was unexpected but significant. My expertise in digital forensics became more sophisticated as a result of applying those skills to complex personal situations. I began consulting with other professionals who were dealing with similar betrayals, helping them navigate the technical aspects of evidence gathering and strategic response planning. The personal healing process took longer but was ultimately more complete than I'd expected. The methodical approach to documenting and responding to Jessica's betrayal had prevented the kind of emotional damage that often results from gaslighting, partial confessions, and unresolved questions about truth and responsibility. Having comprehensive evidence of what had happened allowed me to process the betrayal factually rather than emotionally, leading to acceptance rather than ongoing anger or self-doubt. 6 months after the exposure, I met Sarah at a cybersecurity conference where I was presenting on the intersection of digital forensics and personal security. She was a fellow consultant who specialized in privacy protection and data security for high-profile clients. Our initial conversation focused on professional topics but gradually evolved into something more personal as we discovered compatible approaches to technology, relationships, and life in general. What I appreciated most about Sarah was her understanding of the importance of digital transparency and security in modern relationships. She'd also experienced betrayal in a previous relationship, though through traditional rather than digital channels, and she brought a realistic perspective to questions of trust, verification, and accountability in romantic partnerships. Our relationship developed slowly and deliberately, with both of us conscious of the importance of building trust gradually rather than assuming it automatically. We shared passwords and digital access from the beginning, not out of paranoia but out of commitment to the kind of transparency that makes deception impossible. We built routines around verification and communication that felt natural rather than suspicious. The contrast between my relationship with Sarah and my marriage to Jessica was instructive in ways that helped me understand what had gone wrong previously. Jessica and I had shared digital access but hadn't maintained meaningful oversight of each other's activities. We'd assumed that transparency meant trust, without understanding that trust requires ongoing verification and accountability. Sarah and I approached digital sharing as an active practice rather than a passive state. We regularly reviewed each other's communications and activities, not as investigation but as mutual accountability. We discussed potential vulnerabilities in our digital practices and worked together to maintain security that protected both our relationship and our individual privacy. The professional collaboration between Sarah and me also enhanced our personal relationship in ways that I'd never experienced with Jessica. We could work together on complex projects that required both our areas of expertise, creating professional intimacy that strengthened our romantic connection. Our shared understanding of digital culture and cybersecurity made us effective partners in every aspect of our lives. 2 years after Jessica's betrayal was exposed, Sarah and I moved in together, combining our technical expertise and personal experience to create a living situation that balanced privacy with transparency, independence with partnership. Our shared home office became a laboratory for developing better approaches to digital security and relationship accountability. The wisdom I'd gained from the experience with Jessica became valuable not just for my own relationships, but for helping other people navigate similar challenges. I began speaking at conferences about the intersection of cybersecurity and personal relationships, helping people understand how to protect themselves from digital deception while maintaining healthy transparency in romantic partnerships. The consulting work I did with other betrayed spouses became one of the most meaningful aspects of my professional practice. Helping people gather evidence, understand their legal options, and develop strategic responses to betrayal provided a sense of purpose that transformed my own painful experience into something useful for others facing similar situations. Jessica and Brandon's lives never recovered from the systematic exposure of their deception. Jessica eventually moved to another city, taking a lower-level position with a company that either didn't know about her history or was willing to overlook it. Her professional reputation in our industry was permanently damaged, making advancement difficult despite her legitimate skills and experience. Brandon's consequences were more severe, perhaps because his pattern of predatory behavior was more extensive and had affected more people. His professional career ended completely. His marriage dissolved with significant financial consequences, and his social circle rejected him entirely. The network of women he'd manipulated coordinated to ensure that his pattern couldn't continue, creating a warning system that protected other potential victims. The broader impact of the exposure extended beyond just Jessica and Brandon to include increased awareness of digital infidelity and relationship accountability within our professional and social networks. People began having conversations about digital boundaries, verification practices, and early warning signs of deception that helped prevent similar situations for others. Looking back now, I can see that the betrayal that destroyed my marriage ultimately led to professional growth, personal wisdom, and a much stronger romantic partnership than I'd ever experienced before. The methodical approach to evidence gathering and strategic response that my cybersecurity training had provided turned what could have been devastating emotional damage into a learning experience that strengthened my capabilities in every aspect of my life. The digital skills that made me effective at protecting organizations from cyber threats proved equally valuable for protecting myself from personal betrayal. The analytical mindset that helped me understand complex security vulnerabilities also helped me navigate the emotional challenges of rebuilding trust and developing healthier relationship patterns. Most importantly, the experience taught me that authenticity and accountability aren't automatic features of romantic relationships. They're practices that require ongoing attention, technical competence, and mutual commitment to transparency. Modern love in the digital age requires new skills and awareness that previous generations didn't need. But when applied thoughtfully, technology can create deeper intimacy and stronger trust than was ever possible before. Jessica and Brandon had gambled that they could use technology to hide their betrayal indefinitely, that their technical precautions would be sufficient to protect them from discovery and consequences. They'd underestimated both my professional capabilities and my personal commitment to truth and accountability. Their mistake became my opportunity for growth, justice, and ultimately, a much better life than I could have built while remaining in a relationship based on deception. Sometimes the best thing your enemies can do for you is reveal themselves completely, giving you the information and motivation necessary to build something infinitely better without them. The digital trail they thought they'd hidden became the roadmap to my freedom, and the evidence they thought they'd destroyed became the foundation for justice more complete than they could have imagined. In the end, technology proved to be the great equalizer. The same tools they'd used for deception became the instruments of their exposure. And the same skills that made me valuable as a cybersecurity consultant made me unstoppable as someone seeking truth and accountability in my personal life.